Incredible turn of events. A billionaire's heart melts after one little girl's touching question. Ethan Sinclair stepped into the community center, bracing himself against the whirlwind of noise and activity that surrounded him. Laughter and shouts echoed off the walls, all underscored by a vibrancy he hadn't experienced in years. On the surface, this was a charming event, a philanthropic gesture to polish his tarnished image after a particularly ruthless acquisition. Yet deep inside, his heart felt like chilled steel. The walls he built around it only grew thicker with each passing moment. Amid the chaotic sea of children, he felt like an outsider, an anomaly in a place overflowing with warmth and unfulfilled dreams. A young girl caught his eye, Lily, with her wild hair and infectious enthusiasm. She brimmed with an energy that heightened the dull ache in his chest. He watched her construct a makeshift rocket out of soda bottles, her laughter lifting his spirits momentarily. Yet, just as quickly, shadows enveloped him. A reminder of the countless Saturday meetings missed at home, and the unexpressed sentiments tucked away in his heart. The haunting echoes of his children's laughter felt far away, obscured by layers of corporate maneuvers and bottom lines. Then, in a serene pause amidst the chaos, Lily turned to him, her wide eyes gleaming with innocent curiosity. "If you had all the money in the world, would you buy love?" The question struck Ethan with the force of a sledgehammer. It rattled his foundations, forcing him to confront the icy chasm that had formed between his relentless ambition and the love he so desperately needed. He hesitated, words caught in his throat. The weight of her gaze bore down on him, shattering his steely facade and exposing the hollow ache within. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days blurred into one another as he returned to the center, visiting with Lily and the other children who reminded him of every lost opportunity to connect. Their laughter twisted knife-like in his gut, sparking memories of family dinners interrupted by boardroom calls. Each encounter ignited something long dormant within him. The longing for human connection that had faded behind the walls of his corporate ambition. He felt his heart unwillingly thaw, vulnerability trickling in between the cracks. Yet, fate wasn't done with him. Not long after that first visit, a deceptive rival in his company exploited a minor oversight, weaving betrayal into the very fabric of his empire. As Ethan grappled with anger and confusion, the once solid ground beneath his empire felt like quicksand. Doubts bubbled within him, the crushing realization weighing down his heart. He envisioned Lily's face, so full of dreams, locked in stark contrast to his own reality. Wealth that brought no joy, power that bred isolation. Could he start anew? Could he forget the familiar numbers that dictated his worth, and instead invest in dreams that were real? As he stood at this crossroads, his thoughts spiraled into a tempest. The tension wrapped around him like a vice, leaving him gasping for the meaning in a life overshadowed by ambitions he no longer wanted. The clock ticked ominously, each second echoing the gnawing question. Could he truly buy love, or must he confront the deeper truth lurking within? The days following the event morphed into an unrelenting cycle of reflection and anxiety. Each moment spent in the office only amplified the echoes of Lily's question, rattling in his mind like an endless loop. Ethan found himself staring blankly at spreadsheets that once sparked adrenaline, but now felt like shackles, binding him to a world he no longer recognized. Gradually, his mind wandered away from numbers and profit margins, fixating instead on the faces of his children. He thought of their forgotten birthdays, their smiles dimmed by his absence. A wave of shame washed over him. This was a stark picture of a life lived in pursuit of ambitions that seemed hollow. Determined to change, Ethan took a day away from his responsibilities at work. The office would continue spinning in its ceaseless grind, but he opted for a chance to reconnect with pieces of himself he had long overlooked. He unearthed an old sketchbook from his youth, flipping through pages stained with aspirations to become an architect, dreams that had fluttered away like discarded paper airplanes. With an impulse he hadn't felt in years, he packed a small bag and drove to a local park, a space he had once frequented with his children. Surrounded by children playing and families laughing, Ethan felt uncomfortable, yet exhilarated. He perched on a bench, observing. A small boy near him was struggling to fly a kite, repeatedly tangled in strings that seemed to embody his own chaotic life. Something ignited in Ethan. He rose from the bench, walked over, and offered assistance. "Sometimes we have to let go of the strings so we can fly," he said to the boy, as he deftly untangled the mess. The boy's eyes lit up, a glimmer of hope resonating in that moment of shared vulnerability. Ethan smiled, recognizing a new layer of himself blooming. He had been so caught up in the strings of his own life that he'd forgotten the joy of lifting someone else's spirits. As the kite soared into the sky, Ethan felt a weight lifting off his chest, replaced by a sense of purpose. It was here, in this fleeting encounter, that he began to understand what it meant to build connections that transcended mere financial worth. It was about the unexpected intersections of humanity, moments where he could give rather than take. Days turned into weeks, and the impact of that day forged a new path for Ethan. He began volunteering at local schools, sharing his once-hidden talent for architecture through community workshops. Lily often visited, her boundless enthusiasm reminding him of the childlike wonder that fueled creativity. Each session became a stepping stone towards rekindling his passion for design and rebuilding his self-worth beyond capitalism's grasp. Yet the shadows of his corporate life lingered, reminding him of the betrayals within his own empire. Knowing that a confrontation awaited him, he steeled himself for the battles to come. As he nurtured his newfound passion and rekindled connections, a resting awareness settled in. Not everything could be mended through good intentions alone. He clenched his jaw, anticipation bubbling beneath the surface. The time had come to face the rival who threatened everything he was trying to rebuild. But would he find strength in the connections he'd forged? Or would those yet untested paths lead to his undoing? The line between hope and trepidation grew thin, and Ethan knew a reckoning was on the horizon. Ethan woke early the next morning, the chill of the air seeping through the thin walls of his home. The memory of the kite flying was still fresh in his mind, a vivid reminder of both a simple joy and a deep-seated yearning. He poured himself a cup of coffee, its warmth providing a moment of comfort amidst his restless thoughts. Today felt different, charged with the weight of impending confrontation, but also lit by his newfound resolve. As he prepared for the day, the reflection in the mirror wasn't merely of a businessman straddling multiple worlds. For the first time in years, he saw a man trying to redefine himself, striving to reclaim the spark he had dimmed. Professionally, he was still tethered to the demands of his corporate role, but personally, he was forging a path forward, a map devoid of familiar landmarks. Driving to the office, his mind spun with ideas. Designs that not only showcased architectural principles, but celebrated the human spirit. He envisioned community spaces filled with the laughter of children, places where his architectural expertise could lay the groundwork for new memories. It was a profound redirection of purpose, one that stemmed from his experiences in the park and his connection to the children he taught. But the thrill of this revelation was swiftly replaced by the tight knot of unease in his stomach as the glossy office building loomed ahead. The once intimidating facade now felt like a cage. His fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel, contemplating the confrontation he would soon face with his rival, Roger. Their last interaction had been tense, steeped in unwritten accusations and unspoken betrayal as jealousy and ambition sat heavily between them. Ethan stepped into the building, determination bolstering his stride. He greeted his colleagues with measured nods, but his focus remained fixed on Roger's office. It was time to approach the beast. No longer would he scavenge for approval in the ruthless hierarchy of profit margins. He aimed to integrate his passion into the waking world, fundamentally altering his work philosophy, and in turn, challenging those around him. As he entered Roger's office, the palpable tension was immediate, swirling like smoke. Roger looked up from his desk, the glint of recognition shadowed by something more predatory. "Ethan," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Swallowing hard, Ethan felt the weight of all he had been cultivating, the lessons learned from children, the will to connect with his passion. "We need to talk," he began, his voice steady. The words tasted foreign but felt right. "I believe our company can do more than just generate profit." Roger leaned back, crossing his arms, a smirk creeping onto his face. "You mean you want us to do charity work in the name of our architecture?" The implication was clear. Kindness was weakness in this ruthless game, and Ethan was stepping into the lion's den. Ethan took a breath, steadying himself against the onslaught of Roger's contempt. "No, Roger. I'm proposing we redefine our legacy. Imagine creating spaces that foster community, inspire creativity, and drive genuine connection. This isn't about charity. It's about progress, a holistic approach to architecture that will set us apart." The room held its breath. Silence thickened in the air between them, and Ethan felt exposed, yet resolved. He was challenging not only Roger, but the very foundation of his own identity. Would he stand firm against the tide of cynicism that Roger embodied? Or would he falter, allowing the shackles of his corporate past to bind him yet again? Time hung heavily as he awaited Roger's response, the tension between ambition and fear crackling like static in the air. Ethan knew one thing for certain. This was a defining moment, not just for his professional life, but for his evolving self. And in that charged silence, as their eyes locked, he felt the gravity of the consequences his confrontation would unleash, not only in their professional world, but in the very essence of who he chose to be. What decision would he make at this pivotal juncture? Would he accelerate towards his dream, or would the shadow of his corporate existence pull him back? The path forward remained uncertain, fraught with tension and possibility. But one question hung palpably in the air, demanding an answer. What was he willing to sacrifice to forge the future he dreamed of? Ethan's pulse quickened in the unyielding silence. The marble walls of Roger's office felt oppressive, laden with the weight of their unyielding rivalry. He braced himself, fortifying his resolve against the derisive smirk stretching across Roger's face. "What if we did more?" Ethan pressed, his voice stronger now, though it wavered like a tender flame in the wind. "What if we earned our reputation not just for corporate success, but for creating spaces that inspire and nurture? Spaces where people thrive?" Roger chuckled, a hollow sound devoid of warmth. "Ethan, this isn't a playground. We're architects, not philanthropists. The world doesn't reward softness. It rewards results." His words lanced through Ethan, provoking a flash of anger. Yet, beneath the anger lay a flicker of doubt. Could passion truly drive profit? Was it naive to believe that heartfelt intention could coexist in the brutal realm of business? Ethan forced himself to meet Roger's gaze, a decision coalescing in the back of his mind. "You might be right," he conceded, feeling a strange mix of betrayal toward himself. "But last week, I watched children run freely in a park. They weren't pondering profit margins. They were simply happy. What would it take for us to spark that joy in our work?" The smirk faded from Roger's face, replaced by an expression of curiosity mixed with annoyance. "You think they'd care about the architectural ribbons of this building? They don't make the world go round, Ethan. The bottom line does." Ethan's heart raced with the pressing urgency of his vision. He couldn't allow Roger's cynicism to extinguish the bright semblance of hope flickering within him. "What if I told you fostering creativity could differentiate us in the market? Attract clients who prioritize sustainability over mere aesthetics?" Roger considered this, the glimmer of calculation returning to his eyes. And how do you plan to pitch that? You can't sell an idea without a concrete plan. A flicker of realization ignited within Ethan. This was his opportunity. Let me take the lead on a new project, he proposed, immediate adrenaline coursing through him. A community initiative. If it fails, I walk away. But if it succeeds, we redefine our legacy. You'll have a front row seat to my vision. The silence stretched on, tension thick as molasses. Roger's expression shifted. Amusement mingled with intrigue. You're putting a lot on the line, Ethan. But what makes you think you can pull this off? I have something to prove, Ethan said, feeling his own heart thundering in his chest. To myself as much as to you. I'll return to those children, remember their laughter. I'll channel their voices, harness this joy into real, tangible designs. Roger leaned back in his chair, hands steepled under his chin, as if weighing the gravity of Ethan's offer. Deep inside, uncertainty festered. Had he dared too much? But the words came forth, buoyed by a newfound conviction. Give me the chance. Join me in this vision. We have the potential to transform lives through architecture. And if I don't try, I'll never know what could have been. Finally, Roger spoke, an edge of incredulity in his tone. The number-crunching titan wants to go emotional? You sure about that? Ethan squared his shoulders, his voice a steady ember against uncertainty. Yes, I'm ready to step off the ledge. The moment lingered, cradled in possibility, as Roger mulled over the offer. All around them, the world continued to pulsate, oblivious to the germination of change occurring within those four walls. Then, without warning, Roger broke into a slow, triumphant smile. Very well. Show me what you've got. But know this. Failure will not be an option. As a sense of electrifying hope washed over him, Ethan felt a surge of potential. He had crossed a threshold, one that pressed him closer to the core of who he wanted to be, someone who fought past surface motifs to authentically connect. But lurking in the depths of his mind was a daunting question. What sacrifices lay ahead on this path driven by passion and purpose? In the span of a heartbeat, Ethan understood this was just the beginning. If he succeeded in inspiring others through his vision, would he also find the key to his own happiness? With a final nod sealing their tacit agreement, he stepped out of the office with palpable tension still echoing in the air, glancing out at the skyline. With every intense decision shaded with vulnerability, the true test was yet to unfold. Would he uncover the depth of his own resolve? Or would the pressures of time stifle his dreams? As Ethan ventured deeper into his future, a new question began to itch at his consciousness. What sacrifices was he truly prepared to make to harness the creativity that danced tantalizingly just beyond his reach? Ethan left Roger's office, each step heavy with the weight of expectation and a burgeoning resolve. As he navigated through the labyrinth of cubicles, he felt the atmosphere shift. Colleagues buzzed around him, oblivious to the internal battle he was waging. What would it take to transform his vision into reality? How could he harness this newfound momentum without collapsing under the pressure? He settled into his office, the familiar clutter greeting him like an old friend. Blueprints scattered across his desk, remnants of projects that had failed to ignite his passion. But those designs felt different now, each stroke and curve whispering potential. He could see it, a clearer outline of a harmonious space, not merely functional, but alive. Gripping a pencil tightly, he began sketching furiously, ideas flowing like water from a broken dam. He could create a space that sparked imagination, a community garden, a multifunctional center, spaces that breathed, where nature intertwined with architecture, promoting not just preservation but delight. But realization dawned on him as quickly as his inspiration. He must approach this with strategy. He couldn't juggle creative ambition and practicality blindly. How would he outline his proposal, and more critically, what data would support the emotional elements he wanted to introduce? Leaning back, Ethan's frustration collided with determination. He needed market research, evidence that hearts weren't the only things that could be swayed. As days rolled by, Ethan immersed himself in gathering statistics on community preferences, environmental designs, and the burgeoning market for sustainable solutions. To fortify his bold approach, he initiated informal discussions in the office, testing ideas on co-workers, pulling them into the web of his vision. Slowly, understanding ratified his passion. People were hungry for change. Slowly, they began to engage with ideas that transcended the conventional. At times, he still felt the toxic echo of Roger's dismissive laughter ringing in his ears, the haunting refrain almost suffocating in its doubt. Yet with every interaction, every piece of insight gained, Ethan began to mold his proposition with clarity. He crafted a proposal that not only outlined the architectural aspects, but sparked a narrative, stories about joy, community, and respect for the earth. He envisioned establishing a design that resonated in both hearts and finances. With the proposal penned, Ethan called for a meeting with Roger. The air thickened with tension as he entered the conference room, but he fought to keep his palms dry and his resolve intact. Roger sat with arms crossed, skepticism veiled in curiosity, his dark brow perpetually furrowing. Ethan centered himself, drawing strength from the memory of children playing in that park. They were not merely dreams. They were the very vindications of his aspiration. "Roger," he began, voice steady as he laid out the proposal on the table. "I want to change how we approach architecture. We can create spaces that aren't just buildings but experiences. I've anchored this in both data and creativity." Roger listened, expression unreadable, scrutinizing every line drawn. Moments of silence felt interminable, ratcheting Ethan's anticipation to a near breaking point. What if this was all in vain? What if the weight of Roger's logics crushed the very joy he sought to embody? Then a flicker of interest danced in Roger's eyes, like sunlight breaking through a storm. "Explain how you plan to implement these ideas effectively. What concessions will you take to outweigh any costs?" Ethan's heart leaped. This was his chance to substantiate the belief that passion could mesh with practicality. "We'll need to partner with local artisans for sustainability. By fostering community involvement, we'll reduce costs and build rapport." Watching Roger's reaction, Ethan sensed a flicker shift, pondering, assessing. They were navigating uncharted territory together. Then, as if summoned by fate, a memory struck him. He recalled a question posed by a little girl at the park. "Why do buildings just exist? Shouldn't they make us feel happy?" Sharing this with Roger, Ethan saw the lines in Roger's face soften. After a tense pause, Roger pulled back slightly and regarded Ethan anew. "Life's not simple, Ethan," he countered, but without aggression. "But we have a lot to gain if we succeed, and a lot to lose." Ethan nodded, understanding the subtle acknowledgement behind the cautious words. Framing risks could turn uncertainty into opportunity, but would Roger's comprehension extend beyond profit margins? "We redefine how we see architecture," Ethan pressed, feeling the hard edge of his hope sharpen. "But it will demand focus and, yes, sacrifices. I'm committed to that, Roger." Roger leaned back, weighing the battlefield of options, pragmatism against creativity, tradition against uncertainty. They were caught in the full flux of a transformative moment. What lay ahead was not just a battle of ideals, but an exploration into what sacrifice would truly mean. But as they locked eyes, the tension shifted yet again. Would he embrace this shift, or let it slip into the shadows of business as usual? Ethan's thoughts spiraled as the realization hit him. This was not merely his fight. He stood on the brink of discovering how much risk he was willing to take, not only for his vision, but for his very self. In this battle of convictions, the answer would dictate not just the project, but the horizon of his own potential. The distant sound of laughter from the streets echoed. He couldn't help but wonder. Would the joy of standing amidst those spaces be worth the sacrifices he'd yet to uncover? Ethan paced the office, determination mingling with doubt. The meeting with Roger had opened a door, but he didn't know how far it would swing. Roger's skepticism still lingered in the air, a reminder of the challenge ahead. He buried himself in the proposal, dissecting every aspect, ready to arm himself for the next encounter. That evening, as rain pelted the window, Ethan felt a growing urgency to harness this moment. He sought to translate his passion into something tangible, understanding that while ideas ignited change, actionable steps provided the fuel. Torn between his instinct and the data he had gathered, he realized he needed to solidify his footing. Half measures wouldn't be enough. Ethan began to draft a presentation. Every bullet point reflected his core belief. Architecture should evoke emotions. He rehearsed his delivery in front of the mirror, aware that his voice must carry the same passion that resided in his heart. The reflection staring back at him was more than a project manager. It was a man on the brink of reinvention. He reached out to his contacts at local nonprofits and community initiatives, forging alliances that could optimize his proposal. In conversations, Ethan found threads of resonance. He shared stories of his vision, how spaces could stand as embodiments of joy and peace. For the first time in a long while, he glimpsed the contours of his ambitions taking form, a testament to the emotional investment that lived within design. The next week unfurled with a series of meetings, each a battleground of ideas. With each interaction, Ethan faced a truth that throbbed beneath the surface. He was breaking new ground, but also risking everything, a potential exposure of vulnerability. Roger's presence loomed like a specter, but interaction after interaction sharpened Ethan's resolve. Each round of feedback became a tool, each critique refining not just the proposal, but Ethan's belief in himself. He learned to navigate pushback with grace, finding strength in vulnerability. There was a glimpse of mastery when he adeptly reframed Roger's concerns about costs into discussions about value, how community engagement could yield both financial stability and goodwill. Despite his gaining confidence, a twinge of anxiety lanced him when he pondered the next round with Roger. What if it all unraveled? Would the facade of progress shatter before his eyes? Doubt curled in his mind. What if he had miscalculated? Then came the day of the presentation. Ethan stood in front of his colleagues, heart racing, palms clammy. He delivered each point with fervor, eyes gleaming as he painted a picture of the spaces he envisioned. Not just walls and roofs, but a tapestry of human experience woven with laughter, tranquility, and connection. But what you didn't know about yourself, he realized, was how deeply you could plunge into the depths of your convictions, igniting passion in others. As the final slide faded, he watched Roger's brows knit in contemplation. Silence settled over the room like a thick fog, pregnant with possibility. This was the moment of truth. And Ethan had to confront not just Roger, but the inner forces driving him. Would he retreat into apprehension, or stand fast? The question thrummed in the air, unraveling the tension built over weeks of labor. In that agonizing pause, Ethan chose to hold his ground. This is more than profit. It's our legacy, Roger. It's how we can reshape the world around us with each project. He stepped closer, engaging. Roger, still locked in thought, finally sighed. You challenge me, Ethan. But will the desire for change be strong enough to mitigate what we risk? An unexpected tremor of hope surged through Ethan. Only this could forge the path forward. But who would yield in the end? Would Roger see the horizon he envisioned, or pull back into safe territory? He took a breath, readying himself for whatever came next. The stakes kept rising, not just for the project, but for Ethan's own transformation. The moment felt charged, the kind that shifted destinies. As the room remained steeped in uncertainty, a deeper truth took root. Courage was not merely the absence of fear, but a decision to engage despite it. Ethan found himself teetering on a precipice of clarity and ambiguity, fully aware that what lay ahead was an exploration of influence, not just in architecture but in his own life. Would Roger embrace his vision, or would the pushback unveil a different journey, leading Ethan to confront the weight of his convictions? and the depths he was willing to plunge into for this change. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as Roger finally met his gaze, a mixture of contemplation and skepticism playing out across the boardroom. The room's air thickened, each moment suspended in time, demanding more than just answers. It demanded a commitment, a risk of sorts that felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing how deep the waters lay below. "Every time you speak, Ethan, I feel your passion." Roger's voice cut through the silence, laced with a note of respect but still cautious. But passion alone can't cover the gaps in our projections. The challenge was laid bare, and Ethan felt each word resonate. He was aware of the mounting apprehension but chose not to show it. There was an intoxicating freedom in the decision to lean into the discomfort. What if Roger's resistance transformed into curiosity? What if the financial metrics he was obsessed with could be reinterpreted through the lens of human experience? In a split second, Ethan decided to reach deeper. "It's not just about finance, Roger. What if we consider the long-term impact on community well-being? Spaces that inspire can lift the spirits of everyone who interacts with them. Isn't that worth investing in?" He could sense the shift as he spoke, words gaining weight, tilting the balance of uncertainty. Roger's brow furrowed. "And if the community fails to engage, that's a risk that could sink our budgets." There it was, the looming elephant in the room, the fear of failure. Every project has uncertainties, but think about the projects that have succeeded, the ones that brought real change. Our goal should be about creating value through connection. Ethan spoke, his voice steady, even as questions spiraled in his mind. Did he really believe this? Was he prepared to gamble everything on a vision? Ethan sensed the resistance, and vulnerability tugged at him. This was more than a project proposal. It was an encapsulation of hope and risk. Yet the stakes felt uncomfortably personal, revealing layers of his own insecurity as an architect and a leader. Each word rang with an urgency to convey purpose. His vision wasn't merely theoretical. It was an emotional embodiment of what architecture could mean in people's lives. "I won't deny it, Ethan," Roger admitted, his demeanor shifting slightly. "You're tapping into something important. But ideas without anchor points can't take flight, I know." A sharp intake of breath set the resolve in motion. But imagine if we harness our resources to ensure engagement. What if we host workshops, collaborate with local artists, and create space for voices that are often unheard? It's not just about constructing buildings. It's about building relationships. For every ounce of skepticism Roger emitted, Ethan pushed back harder, allowing emotion and intellect to fuse within his responses. The more he spoke, the clearer it became how crucial this dialogue was, not just for the proposal or Roger's approval, but for Ethan himself. He could feel confidence gathering. A realization dawned that he stood at a vascular crossroads in his career. "I'll lay it out for you, Roger," Ethan said firmly. "Risk is inherent to innovation, but so is opportunity. If you push this away, are you willing to let fear dictate our decisions?" The silence stretched, but a glimmer of respect emerged in Roger's eyes, an acknowledgement of the gamble Ethan had taken. This wasn't just a fight for approval. It was a declaration of intention, an assertion of who Ethan was becoming, both as a professional and an individual. Just as Roger opened his mouth to reply, the phone rang, the chime breaking through the tension. It was the secretary calling to inform them that several stakeholders were convening shortly. Ethan felt his heart sink and rise in that instant. This might be an unscheduled opportunity or an unwanted interruption. "Ethan," Roger said slowly, shifting gears, "I see the sincerity in your passion. Let's explore this further with the stakeholders. But be prepared to face opposition. You'll need to counter more than just my concerns." Expectation and fear clashed within Ethan as he nodded. This was just the beginning, and it felt wildly exhilarating. Yet as he pondered the ramifications of Roger's warning, the expanse of what he was about to step into sunk into his consciousness. Would the stakes rise even higher, and could he remain centered amid the chaos? As they moved toward the next phase of discussion, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the tip of the iceberg. The turmoil ahead was palpable, but so was the chance to shift perceptions, not just of others, but of himself. In that mob of uncertainty and expectation, one question nagged in the back of his mind. How far was he willing to push for the vision he craved? Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the upheaval within. Ethan entered the room where the stakeholders had gathered, the tension almost suffocating. He scanned the faces around the table, noting the mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Each person represented a facet of the organization. Some clutched financial reports, while others bore expressions that conveyed both interest and doubt. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but this was his moment to soar or falter. As he took his place at the head of the table, a voice interrupted his reverie. "So, Ethan, you really believe that these community-focused ideas can yield financial results?" It was Greg, a seasoned investor known for his analytical rigor. The challenge in his tone was unmistakable, an attempt to demarcate the boundaries of what was deemed acceptable in their discussions. Ethan inhaled deeply, the air thick with apprehension. "Absolutely, Greg. We've seen time and time again that when a community feels valued, they invest back into their environment. Public sentiment fuels economic growth." He felt his heart rate quicken, but there was a flicker of resolve igniting within him. "You might need more than sentiment to sway this group," chimed in Laura, another stakeholder, her fingers tapping rhythmically against her notepad. "What specific metrics are you using to support your assertions?" The moment of vulnerability crashed over him like a wave. He had laid out a compelling vision during his discussion with Roger, but now it was time to back that vision with data and actionable steps. "It's not just about metrics, it's about the narrative we create," Ethan replied, quickly recalibrating. "We can look into case studies of similar projects, focusing on retention rates in empowered communities. I believe these stories can illustrate the tangible benefits that go beyond simple ROI." Ethan watched as the mix of faces began to shift slightly, the initial skepticism giving way to intrigue. It wasn't enough to sway them entirely yet, and he knew that. He would have to dig deeper. "Let's also explore how the integration of local art and culture can enhance our attractiveness as a destination. Imagine partnering with local experts to create spaces that tell a story, a narrative that resonates with the community and attracts tourists." As he continued to speak, his confidence started to swell, fueled by the potential of his vision. He drew on examples he had studied, instances of urban renewal where public interest had skyrocketed alongside community investment. It felt like uncharted territory, but with each mention of a successful project, his conviction grew. Every word exuded an urgency that seemed to penetrate their hesitation. Yet, somewhere beneath his enthusiasm, a subtle wave of insecurity rippled through him. Was he sharing a vision of hope, or merely a fanciful dream? The nagging question from before returned. What if he was pushing too far too fast? The atmosphere shifted again as Roger leaned forward, engaging with the discussion. "Ethan's point about narrative is crucial. If we present our vision effectively, we may indeed see a ripple effect of interest and engagement." Encouraged, Ethan pressed on, "And we can set milestones to measure engagement success. We can plan workshops, open forums, and collaboration with local artists. Each step will be an opportunity to engage the community and bring them into our fold. The risk can be mitigated through targeted strategies." As the meeting progressed, Ethan began to notice something new. Collaboration over confrontation. Ideas bounced around the table, building upon his initial vision. There was hesitation too, but also possibility. A delicate balance of doubt and curiosity began to stitch their voices together, albeit tentatively. Yet with every fluctuating mood in the room, Ethan felt pending dread. What if, after all this, the tide turned against him? As names of potential opponents arose, his heart began to race again. Confidence was a delicate construct, and opposition could dismantle it in an instant. Then just as he thought they were reaching a consensus, Greg shot an electric question across the table. But what if the community isn't interested? What's your backup plan? Ethan felt a cold sweat bead along his brow as the group leaned forward, their interest piqued, but minds still skeptical. This was the moment, the risk, the stark reminder that dreams required resilience to both formulate and defend. Right then, a realization crashed into him. He had to be ready, not just with plans, but with self-assuredness. The idea that failure might loom closer than he anticipated reignited his pulse, motivating him to strategize and reframe with more tenacity than before. He knew then that this challenge was more than a mere proposal. It was a pivotal juncture that would define his capabilities. What happened next would not only affect the project, but would also carve his identity as an architect and a leader. Ethan locked eyes with Roger again, the shifting dynamics of trust colliding with every question asked. He might have started on a solitary journey, but now he felt the palpable hope of a conversation transforming a potential defeat into fortified resolve. Would he drown in uncertainty, or would he rise to the occasion and shift the impending tide in his favor? Ethan's heart raced as he prepared to respond to Greg's challenging question. The collective gaze of the stakeholders bore down on him, each pair of eyes filled with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. This was the moment he'd anticipated, yet the question, laden with implications, cut deeper than he expected. "Let's think through a proactive strategy," he suggested, keeping his voice steady. "If a majority isn't on board, we can pivot towards educational outreach, gauging interest through surveys and pilot programs. We can validate our theory through a smaller-scale initiative. This way, we minimize risks while still showcasing our commitment." He detected a slight shift in the air, but the doubt lingering in Greg's expression told him that one answer wouldn't seal the deal. Ethan's mind raced, searching for additional ways to bolster his argument while maintaining authenticity. "Consider this," he continued. "What if we engage influencers within the community, local leaders, artists, and educators? Their stories would resonate far more than statistical data alone. Relationships foster trust, and trust begets interest and investment." With each word, he spoke less to convince them and more to affirm his belief in the project. If he could inspire passion in himself, perhaps the stakeholders would catch some of that fire too. A fleeting glance at Roger, who nodded in silent encouragement, reassured Ethan that he wasn't standing alone after all. But as the evening wore on, the questions kept coming. Laura pressed for detailed projections, while Greg wanted to understand the economic scalability. Each inquiry prompted a splinter of self-doubt, but beneath the questioning, Ethan noticed something promising. His responses were becoming more instinctual, as if the stakes demanded a deeper part of him. With newfound resolve, he encouraged dialogue. "Let's collaboratively dissect this. You all have vast experience. Your perspectives could be invaluable. If we refine our approach together, we might build a framework that addresses our community's two-sided interests." Suddenly, Laura offered a challenge. "That's admirable. But what happens if the investment doesn't yield results? Will you still advocate for the cause?" Ethan felt a prickle of vulnerability rise. It was one thing to propose ideas when enthusiasm thrived, but the weight of potential failure loomed larger. He squared his shoulders, channeling every ounce of determination. "Then we learn. Every endeavor carries the risk of failure. The crucial aspect is whether we adopt a learning posture. If this project fails, I refuse to see it as an end. We'd reflect on what worked, reconfigure our strategies, and try again. Our mission is to create something meaningful, not just profit-driven." A shift again. An electric charge ran through the room, a blend of acknowledgement and surprise. The dynamics of the meeting rippled, testing each stakeholder's comfort zone. And there, amid the sparks of emerging connection, Ethan felt the foundations of his professional identity begin to reshape. Maybe he was more than just a designer. Perhaps he could cultivate a culture of innovation that valued every voice. Yet as optimism stirred, the shadows of doubt haunted him. He grappled with a tight knot in his chest, Was this progress? Or was he merely skimming the surface of deeper challenges lurking beneath the excitement? The fear of failure echoed ominously, demanding attention, a fragment of himself reluctant to surrender to confidence. Eventually, a breathless silence enveloped the room. As Ethan surveyed the group, he could see subtle shifts in their attitudes, curiosity flickering behind their eyes. He had transformed individual resistance into cautious interest. But he still needed more. The meeting could have been a turning point, or a route to unforeseen problems. He'd begun to discover a capacity to navigate complexity, a skill once dormant now awakening within him. But he was still very much on a precipice. He leaned forward, determination crystallizing in his gaze. What if we rethink our entire approach? Let's reframe this not as a community endeavor, but as a shared vision that aligns with our overarching values. You've all faced challenges in your careers. Wouldn't we be creating an example for others to follow? In that moment, Ethan felt an unprecedented shift within himself, a burgeoning confidence intertwined with the fear of failure. He had stepped into uncertainty and emerged with clarity. The space felt charged with possibility, yet that familiar knot tightened again, this time more pronounced. Would his newfound path lead him to unfathomable success, or expose vulnerabilities he wasn't prepared to face? The level of scrutiny heightened, and just as the stakes began to crystallize, Ethan realized the question loomed larger than any he had encountered thus far. Could he transform the fear that haunted him into the very fuel necessary for human connection and professional innovation? Ethan stood at the threshold of a new era within his professional life, the balance of courage and trepidation intertwining to create a heady anticipation for what lay ahead. The weeks of hard-won dialogue with stakeholders had opened doors, revealing the potential for genuine change within the firm. He reflected on this transformative journey, one that started with the innocent question posed by Lily, the young girl whose simplicity melted the icy barriers around his heart. Now, he was no longer just a corporate titan. He had become a catalyst for creating spaces that sparked inspiration and fostered connection. A calm resolve settled over him, amplifying his sense of purpose as he prepared for the final presentation of his community initiative to the board. He knew now that the stakes extended far beyond mere corporate gains. This was his opportunity to redefine legacy, not just for himself, but for the organization and the communities they could empower. In the conference room, surrounded by the decision-makers he had once feared, Ethan felt a surge of confidence wash over him. No longer a spectator in his own life, he embraced the moment, ready to communicate his vision with clarity and conviction. He presented his meticulously crafted proposal, underscoring how genuine engagement with the community could drive economic success while fostering authentic connections. Every moment we invest in our communities ripples outward, Ethan stated emphatically. Imagine transforming our role as architects from mere builders of structures to visionaries of shared spaces, spaces imbued with life, creativity, and joy. Our buildings can become beacons of hope, where humanity thrives. A moment of silence hung in the air, pregnant with potential. He watched as their expressions transformed, curiosity weaving through the room like threads of fabric. It was a tangible shift, reminiscent of the metamorphosis he'd experienced within himself. No longer was he just advocating a project. He accepted the responsibility of leading a movement that would intertwine architecture and the human experience. Their questions followed, critical, probing. But this time, Ethan leaned into them, confident in the groundwork he had laid. With each answer he provided, he infused the conversation with passion and conviction, turning skepticism into thoughtful consideration. He could sense a wave of respect growing as the board began to recognize the value of his vision, the human-centric approach aligning with their bottom-line interests. And just as the presentation neared its conclusion, one final question emerged. Ethan, what if this doesn't succeed? Are you willing to take responsibility for the risks involved? The weight of this inquiry felt monumental. In that strained moment, Ethan's heartbeat quickened, yet he found clarity amidst the tension. "Failure is a possibility, and I accept that," he replied, unwavering in tone. "But I also believe in the power of resilience. Through our shared commitment to transparency and adaptability, we can learn and evolve. Success isn't just in the outcome, it's in the journey we take together." Applause erupted as he finished, the sound echoing not only through the room but resonating within his heart. In the days following the presentation, results manifested just as Ethan had envisioned. The initiative was green-lighted with newfound support from the board. More significantly, it sparked an internal fusion of ideas throughout the organization, encouraging collaboration that transcended silos. Ethan embraced the changes and challenges with an unshakable understanding that he had transformed a pivotal moment of personal reflection into a powerful driving force. He penned designs that not only reflected architectural integrity, but also articulated stories tied to the communities they served, a realization underscored by the laughter of children and the vibrant pulse of life. As he stood among his colleagues, sharing brainstorming sessions and plans within the office, Ethan felt an unfamiliar, yet deeply satisfying sense of belonging. Appointments to lead workshops and community meetings became second nature, as he engaged with local residents and artists. His inbox overflowed with ideas and requests for collaboration, an invigorating testament to the commitment to his vision. Ethan Sinclair, once an empire builder cloaked in corporate armor and ambition, had discovered the immeasurable value of connection. Today, he found himself not merely acknowledged but celebrated, a respected leader in his field whose designs were capable of capturing the essence of humanity. With gratitude surging within, he gazed out of the office window at the cityscape, once an intimidating reminder of profit margins, but now a vibrant canvas awaiting transformation. He had achieved what felt impossible not so long ago. He conquered the fears that had shackled him, fostering a legacy rooted in humanity, creativity, and purpose. This journey of growth culminated in Ethan's declaration, resonating deeply within him as he felt the final piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not only an architect of buildings, he was an architect of dreams, boundless and shared. Transformations weren't just markers of success, they were affirmations of human connection, an invaluable reminder that extension beyond oneself encapsulated true achievement. Now is your time to join this enlightening journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to help the algorithm work its magic. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to take action. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.